Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and in this week's training, we're going to be creating an incredible rental property application manager part 2, where we're going to be adding in properties and database, showing you how to add new properties. We're going to be showing you how to add attachments to those properties, tracking, and we're going to be creating a one-click unit load where we can add unlimited units to any single property, as well as adding attachments to those properties. It's going to be an excellent part 2. We're going to go step by step, every line of code. You won't want to miss it. Let's get started. All right, welcome back. I've got so much in store for you this week, part 2 of the rental property manager. We took a lot last week, we handled a lot, but we've got even more tricks, techniques, and tips for you to learn how to create your own applications. That's what I'm here to do, to teach you how to create your own Excel-based applications so you can earn big money and get that promotion, or learn how to build that application where you can sell for passive income. If you do like these trainings, I just ask that you subscribe down below. Make sure you click on the notification icon bell. That's going to ensure that you get these trainings delivered to you each and every Tuesday. I create them absolutely free. In fact, this application is also free. All you've got to do is locate it in the links down below, either with your email or Facebook, and we'll get that delivered to you right away. If you do like these applications, I put a bunch of them together. In fact, I put 175 of them all together inside a single zip pack and made that available for you on a single download. It's just $66. That's only 37 cents per application, and that's going to help us out. If you pick that up, that'll make sure you have these trainings each and every Tuesday for free, because I like to create these for you, and that helps us do just that. Don't forget, that also includes a free application library deep inside. What that'll do is give you a single click to open the application and another click to locate the training on YouTube. So I put it all together for you, and of course I've got a free VBA library with some of my best macros in there. So I hope you picked that up. Let's get to the training. I've got a lot to cover. Last week we did an amazing job. We built this really cool design dashboard where we're going to be able to add properties. So we've designed the design portion of this, but we still have to do the VBA portion to make it active. We put this little home. It's going to allow us to go back. We've got tenants and unit. We'll be able to add multiple tenants to multiple buildings, and of course have attachments with them as well. We also have income and expenses. We may want to track any expenses associated with specific buildings or units, or we also want to track the income and rent coming in. This screen is going to allow us to do this, just that. We also have the ability to have recent income transactions and attachments tied to each individual property or each individual expense. In this case, units and tenants, we also have that. Clicking here, tenants, so we can add additional units, tenants for any type of particular building or apartment. So a lot to cover on that. And lastly, we've got a really cool reminders and alerts on that, so you can set your reminders and alerts. We're going to be building that out today. And of course, it's to top it off, we're going to add an incredible single click dashboard here. So a single click on any of these is going to launch that report and show that report and graphs or whatever charts you want. I'm going to show you how to do the design. I'm going to show you how to do a couple reports, but you can put unlimited reports. It's going to be really easy for you to add, update, and change this as you like. So let's get to it. We've got a lot to cover this week, so I want to get right to it. So we ended up last week with the properties and buildings. So that's what I want to do. I want to give ability to add new properties and buildings. So we've got actually two different toolbars. If you remember, we've got this existing group, and I've got a one that's called new group. We will not be viewing both of those at the same time, just one of those. That's why they're on top of each other, because only one will show at the single time. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have the ability to simply add a single property here, update a property, save it, and add attachments accordingly to that. So the best way to do that is to do it with VBA. Now we have some information that we also need inside here. So we also want to show, I want to know what row. Now keep in mind that we have a property database. So the first thing I want to do is I want to know what row we're located on. Now it's going to be based on the property name. In other words, we've got a property, I've got names here, and I've got property IDs. Last week we created a few named ranges. Let's go take a look at those. We can review. I've got property name here. If we look at that, we're going to use offset creating that property name. We've got property ID here. So those two are going to help us out to start. But what I really want to know is I want to know what row this properties found. When I select a specific property, I want to know what row it's on. So to do that, I want to put it inside a formula. The first one, keep in mind, is on row 4. So if we use an index match, and we're going to be adding 3 because our first result, which would be 1, I actually want the row number. So how do we do that? Let's go back into the properties, and we're going to put it right here. I'm going to put in property name row. So basically it's the row based on the property name. And here's our window for our property, but we need to add a named range in there because I want to select from a specific property. Okay, so that we can load out. That's how we select different properties. So all we need to do is go into the data validation here, and then simply add it based on the list. And we're going to select that same property name. So we're going to do equals property and then underscore name, and that's going to add that named range there as a drop down list. So now that we've selected one, what I want to do is I want to put the row of that right here and based on this name. So how do we do that? We can use an index match, but if there's an error, we want to show empty. So what we'll do is we'll wrap that on in error. If error equals if error, and then what we're going to do is we're going to run index. Now what are we indexing? What do we want to extract? We want to extract the property ID. So we're going to type in property ID, that's the name we've already created. And then what I want to do next is I want to get the row number on that. So the row number is going to be based on, of course, the property name, which is what we're looking up. Now the property name you'll see is right here into E3. So we're going to type in E3. And then what we're going to do is what is the lookup array? I want to look up the array. It's going to be the property name. So we want to look it up, and we want an exact match. So we're going to use 0. Once we have that, what is the column? It's going to be just column 1. What if it's an error? An error, I just don't want to show anything, double quotes and blank. So that's just what I want. And notice it's showing 1, but I really don't want 1. Remember, I want the row number. So how do we get that? Well, we want 1 is the first, of course, is the first, 2 is the second, but I want the row number. I don't want just the first value. So what I want to do is I want to add 3 to that because 1, that's what I want. I want row 4. So Franklin Center is on row 4. So when we go into the property database here, we see Franklin Center is on row 4. That's exactly what I want. So we'll go ahead and we'll give that a, let's go ahead and drop this down. There's going to be a few of them out, probably about 4 of them or so. So I'm going to left justify them, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to color those because I want to put different things in there, and I want to highlight them accordingly. And then I'm going to put some borders around it. Now, so we'll put the borders all the way around throughout the name. Let's highlight that here and put all the borders around. Okay, so now we have, so what else do I want information? I want to know the actual property row based on the ID. Now I want the property row based on the ID, right? I'm going to put the ID right here inside I3. So this is the property row based on the name, and I want one based on the ID. It's going to be, in this case, the same. So how do we do that? So this is going to be the property ID row. So basically it's the same row, but it's based on different values. So in this case, what do I want to do? I want to run in match, basically simply just a match. We're going to run if error. We're going to wrap around if error. So let's go up here to the formula bar, equals if error. And then I want to do a match. And I'm going to be matching, and I'm going to look up whatever is located in I3. I'm going to run a match. So this is when we're going to simply just look up the array. So it's going to be property ID. And again, I want an exact match, so I'll put in 0. And then, of course, I want the row. So in this case, again, we're adding 3 plus 3. We want the row, and then if there's an error, we just want to make sure that it is empty, so we can do that. So actually right here, if error, there we go. So now we've got it. So now as soon as I enter a property ID here, we're going to extract the row. That's exactly what I want. Why is that? Because when a property loads up, we're going to put that ID in here. I want to know what row it's saved on based on the ID, but when a user selects it, I want a property row so that I can go ahead and load that row. So that's going to help us out. We need both of those. I also want to know the next project property ID, the next property ID, so that when I add a new one, I know which one's next to add in. It's all going to be incremental. So we're going to use the max formula in that. For example, if we go into the property database and we see 3 properties, our next one's 4. So I want a formula to calculate that 4. So the best way to do that is to use the max. And again, we're going to wrap that around if error. So what I want is the next property ID, okay? And in this case, we're going to equals if error. If there's an error, meaning there's not found. Why would there be an error? There'd be an error if there was no data. Okay, so we're going to use the max formula, and that's property, again, property ID. So what I want is the max of the property IDs plus 1. Okay, so that's going to get us our next one. If there's an error, what I want, I just want 1. So I'm going to show 1. That means in case there's no data, I just want it to start at 1. So that's it. I also want to know the next attachment ID. We're also going to have attachments here, right? Same thing. We have an attachment database. Let's build this out because we haven't done it yet. because I want to store attachments in here. So the best thing to do in this case is just simply to add some information. It's just going to be the basic information for the attachments. So what we're going to do is we won't have data mapping in this one. Why is that? Because they're going to come from different. We're going to have attachments for properties. We're going to have attachments for units. We're going to have attachments for transactions. And there's only a few records. So we've got different screens feeding into this attachments database. Therefore, we don't use data mapping. So what do I want? I want an attachment ID. That's important. I want the property ID. What if it's attached to a specific property? I want to put the property ID. It's optional. And I also want a unit ID. Right? If that specific attachment is for a specific unit or apartment, we want to know that. And also, what if it's tied to a specific transaction? So I want the transaction ID, also optional. So we've got that. And of course, I want to know the file path of the specific file. That's going to help us. So we've got all that information. Let's just give it a name called attachments database. So we've got the attachments database, and now we'll just merge and center that. Keep it pretty simple. We don't need to do a lot with this. So then we just have a color, and then we'll set the color down here. So we put some borders around it, and we'll just set a specific color. Okay, so that's all we really need. But what I want is the attachments ID. So I'm going to put some numbers in here just to start out, just as we always do. So this repetition is going to help you learn. And now what we're going to do is create a named range based on that, just as we always do. So I'll select the first row basically here in the attachments, including the header. And formulas, you don't need to select it necessarily. So I'm going to put in, create something called attach ID, and it's already set just the way I like it here. So we'll tab down here, and then what I want is, again, offset. So I'm going to select the first one. But what I want to do is I want to make sure it's offset. So offsetting attachments A2, right? But I want to use the header again, but not include the header. So I'm going to go one down. I'm including the header because if there's no data, there won't be any error. Comma twice. Count A. I want to count all of the items inside this. So also including the header, but then taking that out. So 999. Again, in this case, it's going to count everything, including the header, and then -1, so we can exclude that header. Comma 1 for the column. So tab out using the tab key, shift tab in. Make sure those dancing ants are centered right around the data that you want. You know you've got the formula right. Click OK. All right, so we've got that. We'll be adding more named ranges a little bit later on as we move through this application. So we have attachments ID. What I want to do is when I assign a brand new attachment, I want to make sure that we have a max formula on that so we can get the right attachment ID for new ones. So we're going to go back into the properties. Next, attach ID, and you pretty much know how this is going to work using the match formula. It's going to be no different. So equals if error max attach ID +1 comma if there's an error we want it to default to 1. That's it. There we go. That's all we have to do. Why would that be? Because we want to make sure if there's no, let's go ahead and delete that temporary data here, and we're going to see that that number is going to automatically default to 1, and that's just what I want here, 1, using that max. So because we're going to be adding attachments here, now we've got this screen pretty much set up the way we want to. So now we can get into the VBA code and start adding, creating ability to add properties. And then what we're going to be able to do is pretty much duplicate that module and then carry it over through making some changes through units, transactions, alerts, and reminders. Then we're going to get to the dashboard. So we got a lot to cover. Make sure you got your coffee or your beverage of choice. We're going to get into it. Also, make sure that you do go through these trainings. I've had a few comments saying, hey, you know, they download this application. It's not working. These buttons don't work. Well, of course, we're on part 1. Now we're going to be focused on part 2, and we'll make things work. But some people are downloading these and expecting to work, and they're not viewing the trainings. They're expecting things to work, and often they do. But, you know, when we have these larger, and if I'm going to be going slower on some of these and walking you step by step, it could be a multi-part. But that's how we learn. We've got to learn the fundamentals. You know, these are great applications, but my goal is to train you and teach you to make these yourself and not just use them, because then you're going to be able to really start making good money, getting lots of freelance jobs, or creating your own products for the marketplace. My goal is not just to teach you Excel, but to make you successful with Excel. And so that's what I do. So try to set time aside for these trainings if you can. And I know it's busy, but try your best. And that's going to really help you learn the fundamentals of making these applications for yourself on your own. So what we want to do is go into the VBA, and we'll get to that. Developers, Visual Basic, Alt F11 to get to that. We have just one module now, but we're going to be creating a few more while we're at it. So let's go ahead and right click anywhere here, insert a module, and the first thing we want to do is rename that module using properties window. So what we'll call this, let's just say property macro. Okay, make sure the only thing you want to do is make sure that the name of this module is not the same as any individual macro. So we want to make sure that they are separate, right? The module name cannot be the same as the macro name. We might as well add them all, so we've got so that we've got a set of them. Let's go ahead and add another one, module. Okay, we'll call this let's say called unit macros, and then we also want some for transactions. So again, inserting module. This one we're going to be calling transaction macros. Make sure you underscore something. There's certain characters that are not allowed. Okay, so macros. And also we want alerts. So we're going to do that. And then lastly, we're going to do the dashboard. So module, this one's going to call alert macros. And then also we have another one. I should be consistent with my capitalization, so it looks the same. So what else we want? The last thing is just the dashboard. So once we have that, we're going to have that, and we'll go over those again. So, and the last one is going to be called the dashboard macros, not cache, although I like cache. Dash macros. All right, we're good to go now. So now we've got alerts, we've got properties, which are going to be starting out. We got transactions. So we've got basically the 4 sections here plus the 5th for the dashboard. That's exactly what I want. We can add to that if needed. So we're going to start off on the properties, and what we want to do in this case is I'm going to make sure that we get all of our variables defined here up there. So we got to dimension those, especially on the properties. So let's go ahead and give that a start. Option explicit, we're always going to start with that. We need to know the property row, so we're going to dimension the property, make sure I get these right, property row as long. I also want to know the property column. We're going to be looping through the columns through data mapping. I'll show you about that. Property as long, so we're going to need that as long variables, whole numbers. Property ID as long, that could be long or string, either one would work. Okay, the attachment row, right? We have if we're going to be adding attachments, we need to know the row of the database of this attachment as long. And also the last attachments row, if I need to find the first available, the last attachment row as long, we need to know that as well because we're going to be adding one. Okay, also we're going to be adding file attachments, so we need to dimension the file folder. We'll call file folder as a file dialog because we're going to need to open that and browse for files. And also I want to know the file path, the file path as a string. So we've got that. All right, so the first thing what we want to do is I want to add a macro. What we'll do is we'll add the names of the macros and then we'll fill them in. So the first thing what I want to do is have sub property save update. Okay, it's going to work. The same macro is going to be for both save and update, which we'll do. The next macro I want to create is called property add new. So sub property and then add new. Okay. And we can just copy this, the first part of it, because each one of the macros is going to be, we want to be consistent with our naming. And then the second one, or the third one actually, is a property load. So sub, paste in there, property, we'll just call it load, that's sufficient. So what next? So after we load the property, I also want to make sure to cancel new. If we're in the new mode, I want to cancel new. So sub, cancel new. We also have the ability to delete property, so we better add that in too. So next up, sub, property, and then let's see, delete. So we want to delete the property, and also I want to add the attachment, right? I want to add a specific attachments to a property. So let's go ahead and add that in, sub, and then property, we'll call this add attach. And the last thing what I also want to do is I want to run a macro that's going to load all the attachments here, right? They're going to come from our database here, but I want to only load those associated with the specific property. So to do that, we need a macro to do that. So we're going to call that property load attach. So let's go ahead and add that in there. Sub property attach load. Good. And that's going to be it for the macros that now we're going to fill in those macros. Because we've done data mapping, it's going to be a lot easier. We don't have a lot of code to write. Okay, so we're going to get into that. Let's go ahead and start out with the property load. So save update, we'll focus on that. So the first thing we want to do is ensure that there's a property name. I'm going to drop this down. I'm going to bring this up here so we can get an idea of both. So we want to make sure that there's a property name. That's got to be required, right? So we got E5 has to contain a value. So we're going to start off with sheet 2. With sheet 2 is our property, so with sheet 2. I'm going to focus on that. If you see that end with pop up, I use auto hotkey. Throughout my coding, you'll see things automatically pop up. I use a free software called auto hotkey. You can Google that, it's absolutely free. So with sheet 2, all right, we're going to start off if dot range E5 equals empty, then what do we want to do? Well, then what I want to do is I want to put in message box. So let's put in here called missing property name. So message box please make sure to add in a property name. Okay, good. So we've got that exit sub. We don't want to move forward unless they've added an exit sub. So we've got that in. Now we can move forward, assuming that they have added a property. We can do that. So the first thing what I want to do is determine, is it a new property or is it an existing property? How do we know that? Well, if it's a new property, property ID is going to be 0, right? It's going to be empty, right? So property row is going to be empty. So if B4 is empty, we know it's new. If it's an existing, like it would be here, it's going to have a row associated. So B4 can tell us whether it is a new record or it is an existing record. So we can use that to differentiate between that. So we'll do just that with inside the code. If .range B4.value equals empty, then we know it's a new record. We'll put new record. Else, we'll put existing, and then close it off with an end if. All right, so now we've got our basic. Now what do we want to do? If it is a new, we have to do a few things. The first thing I want to do is determine the property row. So property row, we've already defined this long, equals, and I'm going to use AutoHotkey to automate that. Dot range, it's going to be the +1 is going to be our first available property row. Okay, so we have that. So now we get, what's that going to do? Remember, that's our first available property row in our database. In this case, it would be 7. So we've got that there. And now we can move on. Now that we've got that, now what I want to do is I want to make sure that we set the property ID. Now we know the next available property ID, that's located in B5 right here. So we can set that up. I'm going to put that directly inside I3 right here. So let's go ahead and add that in. Dot range I3 dot value equals dot range, and then of course we're just going to put a B5. So that's going to set our next property B5. Next property ID. And I also want to place it one more place. I want to place that directly inside our database. So I want to place it right here inside column A. So we need to add that in, because if it's a new record, if it's an existing, it'll already be here. So we don't need to put that, but only for new records. We're still in the new record section. So in that case, it's going to be sheet, actually this is going to be sheet 7, our property database, right? Sheet 7, the first available row inside sheet 7. Okay, that's our property database. So that's where we're going to be placing sheet 7 dot range A and the property row dot value equals B5. Okay, that's also the next property ID. Okay, so we've got the property ID set there and we've got it already in there. So now what I want to do is I also want to add that property name inside the select property. So whatever is located in E5, I want to place it directly in E3. So we can do that with this line of code. So again, dot range E3 equals, and then we'll just copy and paste it here. That's fine. E3, and then just update the 5. So we're just going to update the property name in the selection tool. So that's going to be E5, and then we'll just put in property name. Okay, so now that's everything we need to do for the new record. But what about if it's an existing? If it's an existing, I simply want to update the property row, and then the property row is going to be located in B4. So in this case, dot range B4 is where our property is going to row. That's for existing records. So property row. Okay, so we've got that done, and now we can close that. And if so, now regardless of if it is a new or an existing, we're going to do something. And what do I want to do? I want to use data mapping, and we've been through this before, but if you haven't seen my videos, I'm going to show you how we do that. So what I want to do is basically, we understand we've mapped it. Part 1, we've mapped this data to this area here. So inside these cells, I3, E5, G5, and so on. So what I want to do is I want to run a loop from here to the last column. What is that last column? Equals column, that's column 11. So now that I know, so I'm going to run it. We've already have our ID here, so we don't need to add that. So I'm going to add it all the way from 2 to 11. I'm going to create a loop, and whatever's in E5, I'm going to place it in the row here. Whatever's in G5, I'm going to place it here. So that's just what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and run that loop right now. So we've already defined property column. This is where this is going to come into play. For property column equals 2 to 11. And then close it, next property. So we've closed our loop. So what do I want to happen? So what I want to do is I want to place all the values from our sheet form into the database. So that's just what we're going to do here. So let's go ahead and write that sheet 7 dot cells. Remember, because we're using cells in this case, because we have both property row, comma, property column dot value equals what? Dot range. Now where's that range located? It's located in sheet 7 in the row 1. So sheet 7 dot cells row 1 property column dot value. So what does that mean? So this range, where this range is located, right here. See this? That's here, 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 here. So it's all there. So that's range. That's what going to be. That's going to actually create it. That's going to add in the property value. Add or update property data. Okay, so all that, just 3 lines of code is going to do all that. So great. So now that we've loaded in, but now what I want to do is I want to only show the existing. Notice it's an existing record. It's no longer a new. So I want to show the existing group and I want to hide the new group. So that's just what we're going to do here. Dot shapes existing group dot visible equals MSO true. Show existing group and then hide the new one. Dot shapes new group dot visible equals MSO false. Hide the new, hide new. Okay, there we go. So now we've got that, and that's all we need to do. But I want to just give a little message box saying that it's been updated. So message box property saved and then updated. Okay, so I guess we can put or updated. So now we've got that. I got a little message box to let the user know it's been saved. So that's it. That's all we need to do for the save. So let's give that a try and let's go ahead and delete what we have here inside our property database. I'm going to take this and I'm going to delete this here. And I want to make sure that we look at that. We notice that next property ID is 1. Okay, so we have that. So we know it's going to be there. We can clear that out. We know it's not going to be 1. So we're ready to add in the property name. So we'll put in Fredder's Center. We're going to put in a property type of residential, and we can put start date of any date in here. We'll fill in all the data because it's good to make sure that the data is there. And then the address, we can assign probably a date that's just a short date here. That'll put the year in. Address, let's just put in 1234 Main Street. And the owner's name, Fredder's. And of course, this is going to be cleared out, obviously, because there's no properties in there. And then we can just put in a phone. And then we can copy that down here, paste that in, and we don't just need the data. And then we'll increase these columns, but it's not too important now. So we've got an email. Let's go ahead and put it in here too, the same email. And then we'll also paste in the manager's name. There we go. So now we've got that. So what I want to do is I want to now run the macro automatically. I'm going to run it without clicking on this, but the first thing what we can do is I'm going to take this button here. This is our group here, our new group. So we want that. That's the one we want to show. So let's go ahead and run that macro, save our work, right, before we move on. And let's go ahead and run this macro, see if there's any issues, and we'll go ahead and run it. Okay, property saved or updated. Okay, so let's take a look inside the database here, property database here, and double check. We'll highlight these and double click. It's going to expand those columns. Fredder's residential, start date, main, owner, owner's phone number, owner's email. Now the formatting doesn't need to be in the database, but in the form it could be. Okay, so it looks like we got everything just the way we want it, and that's perfect inside the properties. Okay, good. So let's assign the macro. Now remember I said that it's going to be also the same macro is going to be tied to both the update and the new. So I'm going to right click on that, assign the macro, and we're going to call this properties save new. Remember that? Or update new, save update. There we go. That's the one I want. And I want the same thing for the new one, but we need to create the add new macro. So let's do it right now. Let's create a macro called add new. It's going to be relatively simple. We're going to drop it right inside here. So we're going to focus on sheet 2 with sheet 2. And what do I want to do with sheet 2? I want to basically clear a lot of fields. So what fields do I want to clear? Well, a lot of them. I'm going to start out with dot range. I want to clear out, of course, E2. I want to make sure that we have, I guess it's E3 would be the selected property. So E3. And I also want to clear out I3. And then G3, because we want to make sure that, as well as E5. And then I definitely want to clear out I5, right? I5 is located there. That's the date there, so we don't need that. And then we have a merge cell, so we want to clear out all the way from E to I5. So in this case, it's going to be E7, not 5, E7 all the way through I7. Make sure in your merge cells, when you're clearing them out, you clear out the entire range. So, and then E9, G9, and I9. So E9, G9, and I9. So I want to clear all those out. So make sure, and then of course, we also have the 11. So let's drop this down a little bit more. We also have E11, G11, and I11 to clear out. So we'll just copy that right here and then change it, update it to 11. That should be sufficient. Okay, so then we have those cleared out. So I want to clear out those and get rid of the last comma. We don't need that. Okay, it's not going to be value, it's clear content. So dot clear contents. That's going to clear the fields. That's exactly what I want any data in there. So I also want to update the shape group. So dot shapes. In fact, we can just copy what we have up here, these two shape groups here, and then what we're going to do is just going to reverse them. Okay, so what I mean by reverse them is we're going to either hide one and show the other. So in this case, it's going to be false, right? False. We don't want to show the existing, so we're going to hide the existing, so make that hide. But I do want to show the new group, so in this case, C, true, and then we're going to show the new group, show new group. So we've got that done. It's a very, very simple macro. That's all we need for that. It's really simple. So let's save our work always, especially when you're clearing out contents. Make sure you save it. Notice we made a mistake here. This should be 11, not 1. So keep in mind, right? If you make mistakes and you clear a large range out, you don't want to make sure you don't do that. So at least save before you do that. So if you clear out too much by accident, you can just close it without saving it. I've made that mistake many times. So we've got that covered. Now what we're going to do, one other thing, I also want to clear out any attachments. Let's add that in there. K4 through K11. Let's add that in there because that's probably good. So comma K4 through K11. Comma K11. Okay, good. So we've got everything out. Now what we're going to do is we're going to tie that macro that we just created to this button right here. Right-clicking, assign macro. We can type in property, add new right here. So click on that. So again, click here, add new. Everything looks good. I got to clear out G5. We missed that. So everything else is good. So let's put in that. We missed the G5. So let's just put it right in here. Right in here, G5. Okay, good. So now we've got everything covered here. Run it once more, make sure it's cleared out. Good, I like it. Okay, so now we're ready. So now we also, remember, we have that same macro that we created already. Save and update, same thing. So we can tie that macro to this button. It's a separate button, but it's the same macro. So property, save, and new. So property, save, update. Okay, good. So now we got that. It's going to give us a warning. Make sure to add your property name. That's just what I want. Now we've created a property, but what do I want to do? Now we want to load it. So if I add a property name in here, when I click here, I want all that information to load in. So how do we do that? Well, we need to create a macro just for that, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So the best way to get that done is we need to ensure when a user enters a property here, we need to ensure that there is actually a B3 contains a value. If for some reason it doesn't, or if this is not blank, select property, and this is blank B3, we know that they've selected an incorrect property or something's wrong, so we need to let them user know. So that's the first thing we want to do. So let's put that inside the macro. So we're going to focus on the property load macro. We're going to focus on this macro right here. We'll raise it up a little bit, and we're going to, of course, we're focused on with sheet 2. So with sheet 2, what do we want to do? If dot range B3, that's just what I mentioned, equals empty, and E3, in this case, the property, selected property does not equal empty, then let them know. And dot range E3 does not equal empty, then we need to let the user know. Then let the user know. Please select a correct property from the list. We'll just put from the list. Exit sub. Can't move forward unless we have that exit. Assuming that we do have a correct property, we know that B3 is going to contain a value. So we can add that to the property row. So the property row is going to be equal to whatever's in B3. That's the row. And of course, then we can just use data mapping to put it back in, put all the data back in just as we did that. So in this case, what we want to do is simply run. In this case, we're going to go from 1. So what I want to do is I want to put that property D right in I3. So let's take a look in the property database. So I'm going to run it from 1 all the way to 11, taking whatever is in our property row and placing it inside these specific cells inside our property database. So that's all we're going to do. So I'm going to do exactly the opposite, except we're just going to change the loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'll change it to 1 to 11 instead of 2 to 11. So in this case, property column equals 1 to 11. But in this case, we're not adding to sheet 7, we're adding to this. So all I need to do is reverse these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it to the beginning. And of course, that equals, I'm going to put that right in the center. So right after value. So in this case, dot range, whatever's in this range, we're going to place inside whatever is in this row, the property row and the property column inside our database is going to go inside this sheet. That's all we have to do. And then we can make this data. It's not date, right? Data. So now that we have that, we're good to go. So now again, all we need to do is also make sure that we put in the proper shapes. Once it's loaded up, we know it's no longer in the new. So I'm going to copy those shapes. I'm going to bring them down here. So we've got the property shapes updated. And I also want to run another macro, which we haven't done yet. I want to, once we load the property, I also want to load in all the attachments associated with that property. So the best way to do that is to do it with a single macro. So we can do that with here. So I have something called property attachments load. We haven't created yet, but we can certainly put in the name here and have it run as soon as it. So property attachments load. That's the one we're going to do that. And we'll add that in just a moment. Okay, so we've got that. That's all we need to do. But the only thing I want to do is we need to, when do we activate this? When should we activate this macro? I want to activate it as soon as the user selects something here. So how do we do that? Well, that's on worksheet change event. So that's going to be worksheet change. So let's go into the VBA and focus on that worksheet change. We're going to focus on the properties here, and it's going to be a change event. So we're going to focus on the sheet and not selection change, but change event. So we can clear out the selection change and we make a specific change to a certain sheet. So if not, I'm going to automate this. If not, so it's using auto hotkey again. We're going to focus on cell, in this case, cell E3. So E3, if there's a change to E3, then we want to make some change. So what is it that I want to do? I want to make sure that we load that thing. And I also want to make sure B3 is not empty, right? We can't load it unless there's a row. So we need to make sure and range B3 dot value does not equal empty, right? It has to contain a row. Then what do I want to do? Then I want to load it. I'm going to paste that, then property load. Okay, good. So we're going to save our work. Now we're going to go into there. So now what we do is we click on here and it loads our property exactly how we wanted it. That's great. That's exactly what I want. Take a look, make sure everything. We can left justify the property ID here. And now we can add some attachments. So what I want to do is I want to add some attachments here. So let's write some macros to do that. The first thing what I want to do though is we've already assigned the macro to this. I want to add a delete, right? We can add the macro here, even though the macros doesn't have anything yet. Certainly we can assign it because we have created a macro, just not put anything in it, property delete. Add new, we can do the same thing here. Cancel new, again, there's nothing inside that macro just yet. We're going to write that in a few minutes. And then we're going to click assign macro and property cancel new now that we have the opportunity. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to cancel new and save and property load. So the idea with cancel new, in this case, what I want to do is I want to load the most recent property or just one other property when we want to cancel it. So it's going to do just that. It's going to act just like that. So let's write those few macros. We've got delete and we've got cancel new, and then we're going to add the attachments in. So the first thing is cancel new. So when I cancel new, I want to get out of the new mode and I want to load basically just any property or the first property available. So how do we do that? Well, basically what I want to do is I want to ensure that there's actually a property to load up. How do we know? Well, we want to make sure that there's at least a single property here. So if there is, if B4 contains a value inside this sheet here, then we can go ahead and load it up. We want to make sure that it contains a value. So let's just write that inside the code. If B4 of sheet 7 is not empty, then we can take that and we can just put it right here in E3. It's going to load up automatically. So if sheet 7 dot range B4 dot value does not equal empty, then what are we going to see? Then we'll just copy this. We're going to need it in a moment. Then sheet 2, we need to specify the sheet because we have the sheet 2 range E3 dot value equals, and then paste in B4. It's going to add in the first property, assuming there was, but only if there is a property. Otherwise we can't get out if there's no property. So now when we click add new and we click cancel new, it's going to do just that. Add new, cancel new. Now we've loaded in the first available property. Perfect. That's what I want. So we have add new, cancel. The only thing we needed to add is delete. So why don't we go ahead and build that now? Of course, for delete, we need to make sure that we actually have a row in B3. So that's the first thing we need to do, is ensure that we do actually have a row. So with the delete, we're going to do just that. And certainly if dot range sheet, let's go sheet 2 on that because we don't need to do much. Sheet 2 dot range B3, and then focus on B3, making sure that contains a value of B3 dot value equals empty. Then we just let the user know they have to select. Then what do we want to do then? Message box, please select a property to delete. Please select a property to delete. Exit sub. Nothing we can do. Now, assuming that this is B3, assuming B3 does contain a value, then what we want to do is assign that to a variable. So property row equals sheet let's see, let's just paste that in there, sheet 2. That's the property row. Now, once we have a property row, we can then delete it. So we can say sheet 7 dot range, in this case, property row, and then we put the quotation, and property row again, dot entire row dot delete. Okay, that's going to delete the entire row. Then what I want to do is, once it's been deleted, I want to make sure we clear out all the fields. So the best way to do that is with our macro, property add new. So that's going to, if you're not sure about the spelling, just put it all in lowercase, and as soon as it changes, you know you've got the right. So notice it changes to upper, and then you know you've got the right macro. Everything's good. Okay, and sub. So that's it for delete. So we're good to go on that. Let's create another property just temporarily and then test out that delete feature. So we'll call this test property. I'm not going to put any details in here to save time. I'm going to save it. Okay, it's been saved now. We have it, and I'm going to click delete. And perfect, we want to delete. The only thing I want to probably do, let's just check our database. It worked just fine. The only thing I want to do probably is add just a warning, because it's kind of easy to do that. So it's always a good idea. So let's do that right now. So let's just add something in here. Let's do message box, are you sure you want to delete this property? And then we'll do is VB yes, no, and then we'll give it a title, delete property. So we've got that, and then we can close it, equals VB no, then exit sub. Gives them an option sub. Okay, so there we go. So now we can just add it. So now when I click delete, let's cancel this. Click delete. Are you sure you want to delete this property? And say no. Okay, good. So that's working just fine. Let's focus on the attachments. I want to add attachments and I want to load attachments. That's going to be it for the macros for the property. Then we can make things a lot simpler. It's going to be an extra long training unless you're looking forward to a part 3. So I haven't decided yet. Let's keep going and see how we go here, because we still have the dashboard to write. All right, let's focus on this adding attachments. So this is a relatively easy one, but I want to focus pretty much on sheet 11. Sheet 11 is our attachments database, right? So that's going to, so with sheet 11, okay, that's the one we're going to be primarily focused on. And what do I want to do? The first thing what I want to do is I want to set the file folder. Remember, we've already defined it as a file dialog all the way up here, file folder as dialog. So this is the variable that I want set here, file, and then FLDR. So that's it, file folder, FLDR, that's correct, equals application dot file dialog, file, not file converters, file dialog. Let's locate the right one, file dialog. Okay, this one right here. And then in this case, we want a file picker, right? So MSO, and want a file picker. We're actually picking a file. So not a folder. Sometimes we want to do folders. So now we're going to focus on it with the file folder. And what do I want to do? First, I want to give it a title. So we'll give it the title is going to equal, let's say, select, just something simple, select a file to attach. So now we've got that. What else do I want to do? I want to put some filters. There's going to be no really filters in this, but because I want to, in this case, any filters, but if you want to do only pictures or something, you can do that. Filters dot add, basically it's going to be any file. So it's going to be, in this case, all files, comma, and then we're going to put in what type of files, asterisk, dot, so, and then asterisk. So this means basically any file type it's going to browse for. So that's what I want. And then 1. Okay, so that's the position 1. Okay, so what else do we want? If they don't select, or if they cancel out of it, I need to go do something. I need to skip something. So if dot show does not equal -1 is for an actual, they've selected something, it's going to be -1. But if it's anything other than that, then go to no selection. So what that's going to do is going to skip something, and I'm going to drop all the way down here. And then I'm going to go into no selection and then colon. Okay, so what that's going to do is going to drop that down. So, but assuming that they have selected something, we need to assign that file path. Remember, we've created that file path as a string variable. So file path is going to be equal to dot selected items and then 1. So it's the 1 is long. So that's the item we're going to focus on. That's going to extract the file path of that selection. Now what we want to do is we need to know the attachment row. What row are we going to be putting, right? I need to take all that information and I want to put it directly inside the attachments. The attachment ID, the property ID. In this case, we don't have a unit ID, we don't have a transaction ID, but we do have a file path. So I want to put in the appropriate information inside the database, but I want to get the row first. Since we're adding, we need to know the first available row, which is going to be A3. And we also know the ID, don't we? because we have the ID. The next ID is going to be right here located in B6. So we've got that information. So let's go ahead and load that information and put that directly inside the database. So the best way to do that is the attachments row is going to be equal to the first, we've already said sheet 11 plus 1. It's the first available attachment row. So now that we've got that, now what we can do, now I want to put in that attachment ID. The attachment ID is always helpful. So we want to do dot range A, all right, that's the column, and the attachment row dot value equals what? It equals the attachment ID. That's located in B6. Equals, of course, we need to specify the sheet 2 dot range B6. B6 is where it's going to go. So B6. So that's the attachment ID. We want a unique ID for each attachment. That's really just good. So we've got to put an ID in here. And now what I want to do is simply put in the property ID, right? I want to know the property ID, and that property ID is located right here in I3. I want to take that property ID and I want to put it directly here into B, column B3, B and whatever row we've associated with that. So let's go ahead and copy. We can just pretty much copy this and change the details and update that. So in this case, it's going to be column B, and it's going to be sheet 2, right? But it's not going to be sheet 2. We're going to put in whatever's in I3. That is the property ID associated with that. So I3. And then we're going to put the comment on called property ID. So now we have the property. The last thing, all we need to do is the file path. The file path is going to be located in column E. So we're going to paste that in column E. And in this case, it's just a variable. We've already set that file path here. So file path. That's going to be the file path. So that's all we really need to do. Pretty simple. And assuming that there's no selection, we're going to drop it down here to go to no selection. So that's all we need to do. But the last thing what I want to do is once I add a property inside the database, I'm not quite done yet. I want to take that property. I want to add it right in here. I want to put that file path, the file path here in the attachments. So the best thing to do is with a macro, what I want to do is want to run an advanced filter. And I want to know all of the attachments for a specified property ID. So what we need to do is put in that property ID and put it in somewhere inside here. So in that case, where do we want to put it inside? Well, I'm going to put it probably, let's just say somewhere like right here. So we're going to put in, call this criteria. And then I want to put in, what do I want? I want the property ID. So I want to extract that. So put in the property ID here. And I'm going to put it in right here. So we're going to bold that, color that so we know what we're doing there. And then, okay, so we have the criteria and the property ID. So I want to put in that property ID right here. And that's going to allow us to extract that. So what do I want? All I want really is the file path to that. So let's go ahead and put the results into O, results. And then we'll put, what results do we want? I want the file path. So I'm going to copy that and put that in here. It's best to copy and paste it just like it did. So I'm going to put the results. I'm going to copy this and paste the formats here. And then we'll have the nice way it looks. I'm also going to be adding criteria. I'm going to merge. I'm going to be adding at a later time. Might as well put it in right now. Unit and transaction ID, not for this particular one, but when we get to that. So I'm going to merge and center this because at a later time, I'm also going to need unit and I'm also going to need transaction. When we load in attachments for those particular, for units or for transactions, we're going to need that here. So doing it now is going to be helpful. So let's go ahead and write the macro. That's just a quick little macro that's going to allow us to basically show it. But let's go ahead and run the macro that's going to allow attachments. So let's right click on here in the individual, on the group or in the individual item, assign the macro. It's going to be called property add attachment. So property add attachment, that's the one I want to add. So the first thing what I want to do, actually we can probably just write the macro here, write the first one and then load it. So what I want to do is I'm going to first write the macro. That way when we add attachments, it's also going to be added to here. So let's do that now. Write the macro, then we'll go ahead and put that. So that's the attachment load. That's the macro I want to focus on right now. So sheet 2, the first thing what I want to do is when I load it, I want to clear any attachments that are associated here. We're going to be clearing them out and refreshing this list basically. So K4 through K11, want to clear that out. So sheet 2 dot range K4 through K11. In that case, what I want to do is just clear them out. Dot clear contents. Okay, so that's covered it. So now we're going to focus on with sheet 11. That's our attachments database. Sheet 11. So what am I going to do? The first thing what I want to do is I want to set that property ID. Whatever property ID is here, I want to take that and put it directly inside K3 because that's going to run our criteria. When we run our advanced filter, I only want a file path associated with this property ID. That's going to come in an advanced filter. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that just inside the code. So let's go ahead and write that. Dot range K3. K3 is equal to sheet 2 dot range I3. I3. Okay, that's going to put in the property dot value. That's going to put in the property ID for the criteria. And we'll just put criteria so we know for our advanced filter, that's it. Once we have that, what I want to do is I want to set to make sure there's no unit ID. We don't need to, we'll just run the criteria on the properties here. So we don't need to focus on the criteria yet for the units. And also what I want to do is we're going to running I need to know the last available row for this attachments database. So let's do that now. So we need to get that. So last attachment row is going to be equal to A99 and XLab. That's going to get us our last attachment row. Okay, so once we have that, now we can run our advanced filter. So now we've got just this is kind of an advanced filter automated text, but now I'm going to update this accordingly. So we're going to run it. Basically, all I need is from, in this case, let's just say A2 all the way through E in the last row. So A2 through E, not the last transaction row in this case, but it's going to be the last attachment row. And we're going to run our criteria is going to be located from K2. So we're going to change this to K2. We're going to make it all the way to K3. That's our criteria just for that property. And I want the results coming inside O2. So all I need to do is update this to O2. That's where we want the file paths to go. So that's going to be in unique equals true. That's good. That'll run our advanced filter. But now I need to determine, I have a few options. I can determine the last row or I can just bring in all the data. But so in this case, we kind of have a fixed number of attachments. So we can just simply say K4 through K11 equals, in this case, we can do O3 through O10. I think that should be sufficient. So let's just write that up in the code. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, add the parentheses here. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish this off now. So sheet2 dot range K4 through K11 dot value equals dot range O3 starting 3 through O10. Through O10. Okay, so O3 through O10. That's going to bring over the attachments, bring over file attachments. That's it. That's all we need to do. It's pretty simple there. That's all we need. It's going to bring it over. It's going to add it all in. Okay, so let's save our work here. And now we're going to go ahead and run that code. So go into the properties, click in add attachments. Let's no selection. Okay, we need to update. So when you have the wrong E, there's an E there. No selection. Okay, let's take a look at that. Okay, let's rerun that code. Add attachments. Okay, looking good now. Okay, let's go ahead and add some attachments in here and just anything will be fine. Okay, adding attachments. All right, that looks good. Let's go ahead and take a look in the database. All right, it's here. We just have to add one more thing. What I want to do is take this attachment load here, property attachment load, and as soon as we select a property, I want to add it to that. So let's do one more and we do that. So back into properties, we're going to add one more here. Just select any file here and click OK. And now they've both added. That's exactly what if you don't want to see this bleed over, just add a space here like this. And then we can just drop that down here and then we don't see the, there we go. That's the way I want it. Okay, so now we've added attachments. That is all the macros that we need for the properties. Let's focus on units and tenants and we'll get as much done as we can in this training. We'll finish the dashboard up next week because we've got a lot. We've already almost an hour into this. So let's go ahead and add in units and tenants, transactions, see as much as we can get to. It's going to be much faster now because all we need to do is simply, it's very similar, just make an update. So let's go ahead and do that. We've added everything into the properties. We now have the attachments. Very good. All right, we'll save our work. We're going to go into units and templates, and basically what I want to do is very similar, except in this case, what we're going to do is selecting a property from here, and we're also going to be able to, I want to select a unit from here and have that unit load up here. And of course, the attachment is going to be the same. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing what I want to do is take all the macros that we just created. Let's maximize this up to the screen limit here. And I want to copy them over and then make the adjustments because a lot is similar. So what we can do is we can just take something very similar and then modify it accordingly. So I'm going to basically Control A, select all of it, go into units here, and then I'm going to Control A so we don't have two option explicits. I'm going to paste that in here. But we do certainly need to make some changes. We can have macros in it. So for every instance of property, I'm going to use find and replace. So I'm going to click on the find. I'm going to drag this up here. Find and replace. Okay, so what I'm looking for is anything, any inference of property. You want to start with the longest name first, property. In the current module, make sure your current module, not current project, okay? Replace, and I'm going to replace that with unit. So we're going to call it unit. So any instance, I'm going to replace all in the current module. It's going to take some 22 replacements. Now what I'm going to do is any instance of the word prop, P-R-O-P, prop, I'm also going to make sure to change that with unit, and then we're going to replace all of that. Okay, that's 26 replacements. What else do I need to do? Notice, right, our properties are on sheet 2 while our units are on sheet 3. So any instance of sheet 2 must be changed over to sheet 3. So we're going to place that with sheet 3 and then replace all. If you see it, cancel out of that, and we can do find one more time. Again, let's do sheet 2, sheet to replace with sheet 3, and keeps going to a different location. Sheet 3, now replace all. Okay, that's good. We've got 11 replacements there. What else do I want to do? I also want to change the database. Notice we're going to focus on the database. In this case, units database is 8, right? Sheet 8. But properties database in this case was sheet 7. So any instance of sheet 7 property database, we want to change to sheet 8, right? So let's do that. So sheet 7, I'm going to change over to sheet. Let's cancel out of that and do it once more time. Okay, sheet 7 to sheet 8. Sheet 7, replace that in the current module with sheet 8. All right, so that's it. Once we replace that, then we can then work within it and just make some updates and, of course, change it. So replace all from sheet 7 to sheet 8 in the current module. Click OK. All right, so we've got that. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now we can basically review and update accordingly. So we'll bring this down here. I'm going to bring this up here so we can get a better look at the tenants and units. And we're going to go ahead and make some updates accordingly because a lot of the things are similar. So unit row is long, unit column, unit ID, that looks good. Attachment row, last attachment, file folder, these are all good. Okay, they can stay just the way they are. I like them. Save, okay, so now we have the macro, it's called unit save update. I like that. With sheet 3, E5 is empty, we're missing the unit name. Unit name is going to be, of course, here in I5, and also G5 is the tenant name. We probably need both of those. Let's at least make sure we have both, I5, a tenant name, and G5. So let's update that accordingly. If E5 is empty, okay, let's make this to G5 or I5, or let's copy this and change that, or in this case, we're going to call it I5. So if either one of those are then missing unit or tenant name, okay? Please make sure to add, so notice we have some strange spelling here. That's because we did find or replace, right? So that's fine. So please make sure to add in a unit and tenant name. Okay, good. So we're good with that. If B4, okay, B4 is empty. So now let's make the updates accordingly on here. We also need to add in some additional information here inside the unit. So the best way to do that, I want to know the unit row. We need to know the unit row. What is the unit row? That is going to be the row that's associated inside this database, right? So we have unit ID, and I need to know the row inside that database of where it's stored. So let's put that in unit row, and I'm going to put that in B4. And of course, what we're going to do is based on this unit number here. So let's take a look here. If I have in the units database, let's say I have a unit name here. It's going to be based on the unit ID actually. So what I want to have is a row based on this ID. So if this ID is 1, I want to put in what the row that's associated with that. So let's left justify that. Color, I'm going to use these two lines. I'm going to color those in that same yellow and give it some borders on that. And then we can associate just a few things on that. So what's the unit row? Again, we're going to use if_air. If_air, okay, we're going to use them index, or actually just a match is fine. We've already have the unit ID. I'm going to look up this unit ID, and I'm going to get the unit ID. We've already set the name range. 0, exact match. If there's an error, I want nothing to show up, right? So I want to know that. 1, but again, I don't want row 1, I want row 4, so we need to add 3 plus 3 onto that. That's going to get us what I want, row 4. I also want to know the property ID that's associated with that. I want to know what property ID is associated with this. How do we know? We can again use an index match on that. So equals if_air, same thing. In fact, we could just copy it here. We've already done here. We know the property ID, the next property ID, we've had the attachments. We can actually write a new formula on that. So let's do that. Equals if_air, and we want to know the property ID. So we're going to index property ID. We're going to use a match. Matching, what are we matching on? Based on the property name. So I'm going to look up this property name and use it on the match. Property name, we've already set the name range to that exact match. Now what I want to do is if there's an error, but actually what do I want to do? Oh, we forgot the word index. That's important. Indexing. Okay, property name, I want the column 1. Now, if there's an error, I want empty to show up. That's going to give us the property ID. So obviously we don't have any apartment, leased apartment, but as soon as we select one, property ID is 1. That's what I want. So I want the property ID because this is also going to have to be able to save within inside the units database. That property ID is going to need to be saved here, so we need to add it inside. So we've already, if we look at that, property ID is going to be located B4, right? Property, let's go back in here. B3. So I want to make sure B3 is set inside our data mapping here, inside our units database. B3 is where it is. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. So next up, what else do I want inside the unit tenant? The last thing, I want the next unit number. Again, next, just call it next unit ID. So again, we're going to use the max formula on that. I think you're familiar with that. If there's an error, we need to set it to 1 equals if error max of unit ID. Make sure that when you set that, all unit IDs are numerical, right? Can't be any text in there. Plus 1, comma, if there's an error, 1, meaning it's going to default to 1 if there's no data. All right, so the next unit ID is 4. Okay, we're good to go. We've saved everything on there. So it's very similar. All we need to do now is just simply write some macros. It's going to help us continue on with the macros. So B4 equals empty. It's a new record, right? B4 is a unit ID. So the unit row is going to be sheet 8, right? That's our unit database. A, our first available unit row. Perfect, just the way we want it. So what about our next unit ID? I3, in this case we wanted it K3, right? K3, which just changed it to K3. K3 is going to equal the next unit ID equals B5. That's right, but it's going to go to K3. In this case, I want it in K3. So continuing on, what I also want to put the unit, next unit ID from B5 also in the database. Perfect. And I want the unit name. What is the unit name? That's going to be inside. We don't need that one. That was exclusively for the property, so we can get rid of that. And then existing, what if it is an existing unit? In that case, the unit row is going to be set to B4, just like it is. Okay, good. So now we're going to focus on the unit columns. Now we're going to focus on adding information to the database. So let's take a look inside that unit database here. We already have the unit ID that's going to be set. So we're going to put in the property ID. So we're going to start at column 2. We're going to go all the way to column, what is this? We're going to all the way to column 12. So 2 to 12 is where we're going to be mapping our data. We've already got our data here. Assuming that it's accurate, that's all we need. So we're going to do just that. 2 to 12 we're focusing on. So we'll update that to 2 to 12. Sheet 8, unit row, unit column, that's already good to go. Range, sheet 8, that's the way I want it. Add and update the data. Good, good, we're good there. We've kept our groups, name groups exactly the same on every screen, so we can keep that. Message box, unit saved or updated. We should put that also in the property and make that fixed there on the properties. It should be updated. So let's go ahead and save that here, also updated here, so we don't continue with our mistakes. So now we've got that. So that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and test that out. Say unit save or update and assign that macro. This is the macro that I want to assign to both the save and the updates inside the unit. So it is this update button here that's going to get that macro along with the new button. So we're going to assign the macro, paste that in here, and the same thing with the save. So it's this button here. We'll get to that. I guess I can drop it down here. This one here is going to get that assigned macro here. Assign the macro and then paste that in here. Okay, so now we can bring it back up. Remember, we want these in the same place right about there. So overlapping is fine because they're not going to show. So let's add in some information and test that out so we can save it. So we're going to put in the tenant name of Lisa, Betty, 2 first names, and then unit number 301C. Okay, unit type, let's put in residential. And notes, test notes. Want to make sure to fill in all the fields in case we miss some data. The lease start, we're going to put on that. Well, let's see, 123. And then the phone number, we need to increase that. All right, either one, lisa@gmail.com. Okay, so we're good to go on that. Let's just copy some information over here. Oh, I don't want to launch an email. No need for that. Paste that inside there. All right, I'm going to copy that here. Copy that. And then paste that in here. Okay, so we're good to go on that. And the phone number I'll just paste in there to make sure we have everything. And then just lease end date 1/23 and then put it 2021. That's fine. Lease ends on the same day. Okay, we're going to save our work here. And then what we'll do is we'll just click update. Normally it's save. We can click the save underneath. That's fine too. Unit saved or updated. Okay, good. The buttons. Let's go ahead and take a look inside the unit database and see how that information fared. All right, so we got the unit ID 1. That's good. Property ID 1. Let's see unit number, resident type, test notes. We can get rid of these now that we have those. The start date here and the phone number here. That's good. Good. Okay, it looks like all of our data is in the right place, just the way I want it. We can get rid of that. And since we had one, so let's go ahead and go back into the units, take a look at everything. That's just the way I like it. We have the update button, click on that. That looks good. Okay, no issues with that. But what I want to do is a few things. I want to take that unit, I want to put it here, I want to add attachments, and I want to continue on with the macros. So let's continue on. Save and update is working fine. So we're going to drop down that add new. We need to update the fields for add new. So let's double check on these. Obviously E3, we don't want any of the E3, so we don't want that. But we do want, in this case, G3, all right? So we're going to clear that out. I3 is fine. We can keep that the way it is, but just not the E3. We're not going to be using E5. Column E we're not going to be clearing out, but we do want to clear out some of the other fields. So let's take a look at this. Inside this, for the new unit, we want to clear out, in this case, G3. So that's important. G3 is already there. I3, also G5, right? Clearing that out too. Good, we got that. I5, we have that. E7, let's take a look. We don't need that, so we can E7 through I7. But in this case, it's going to be G7 through K7. That's the merge cell. So let's make that update. G7 through K7. Okay, we also need to add in K5 too. So we're going to put in that right here. K5. Continuing on here, G7 to K7. And then as far as the 9s, we don't need E9, but we are going to need G9, I9, and we're going to need K9. So let's add in the K9 here. And continuing on E11, we don't need E11, but we do need G11, I11, and we're going to need K11. And also what I want to do is I want to clear out the attachments. In this case, it's column M. So we're going to update this column M. Okay, we don't want to clear out. So we want to clear out anytime we do a new unit, we certainly want to clear out that. And I guess we could probably clear out the existing units because we don't know what building. So D4 through D11, we're going to clear those out too. Let's add in those. Let's add in those at the beginning. D4 through D11. So that's it. Let's double check to make sure we don't have any issues with that code. Clearing the contents, so everything else is going to be the same. Save our code. Assign this macro. We can copy this and paste it. This is the add new, so that's the one we're going to focus on. Right-clicking the icon and the shape itself since it's within a group. Assign the macro, paste in that, and click OK. Click add new. All right, and let's take a look, make sure everything looks good. That looks good. Okay, perfect. That's the way I want it. So save, click, make sure to add a unit 10 name. Perfect. That's the way I want to make sure we have those required field. That is required. Okay, so we've got add new. Now what about unit load? Unit load. Okay, again, we need to make sure in this case when we're loading a unit, I want to make sure that we actually have a specific unit row in B4. B4 is required, so we can't load that. So let's continue on with that. Make sure we have that. B4 must contain a value. So B4 is equal to empty. Then we need to let the user know. We can get rid of this. And of course, sheet 3, please select a correct unit from the list. That looks good. Okay. All right. Unit row. Otherwise, unit row is going to be in B3. Now, in this case, B4. So we're going to change that to B4. 1 to 12. In this case, we're loading, but we don't want to load in. I don't want to load in everything. Why is that? Because I want to get the information. I want that property name to be loaded here. That property ID is column. These are formulas, so we don't want to change those out. So when I go to units database, I don't want to update. Unit ID is going to be already there. We're going to put that in a moment. But I want to make sure that we only load in starting from 3 all the way to 12. So we're going to load in that information. So it's going to be 3 to 12. So in this case, we're going to say sheet 8. That's everything else is good. Add or update the unit data. And then, okay, update the code. So now what we're going to do is we also need to add in the information. But we'll add in the additional information like the property in just a bit. So unit attach load, right? Attach load. I want to add the attachments. We're going to write that, or that macro should be there. Then basically, so once we load into units, we want those attachments associated with that unit to load here. So we're going to get to that also. Okay, so we've got that cancel new. We probably don't need cancel new in this sense, so let's clear that out. Well, we'll need delete, so let's add in delete since it's the next thing, and double check that, and then we're going to add it. So unit delete. First of all, again, I want to make sure, are you sure you want to delete this unit? Yes or no? That is good just the way it is. If B, in this case 4, right, unit row is on 4. If B4 is empty, please select a unit to delete. That's good, right? Unit row is going to be located in B4. Right, sheet 8 or unit, perfect. Unit add new. Okay, everything. See how easy it is to update that? Once we've converted it, I'm going to do the same thing again. So unit add attachments, unit add attachments. This is going to be very, very similar. So let's write this over. Let's continue on to make sure that we're adding attachments. Sheet 11, everything looks good. Sheet 11, the only thing we need to make is a few updates to this one. Nothing to change here as far as we're browsing for a file, right? Attachments row is going to be the same, right? The attachment ID is going to be the same. In this case, the attachment ID, we will set that in this case. We can put that in here, but we can also put that, we've already really located here, the next attachment. So we can just set that to sheet 2 B6 is going to be the next attachment ID. So why don't I just make it that? So the next attachment ID is sheet 2, right? Keep that on sheet 2, right? Because we don't need it twice. That's fine enough. Sheet 2. What about the unit ID? The unit ID, or the property, actually this should be property ID. We are going to need unit ID. Certainly that's going to be then C. C is going to take on the unit ID. B is going to take on the unit. Let's make sure I didn't confuse you. Property ID first. I'll show you what that is. Property ID, then unit ID. So just like this. Inside the attachments database, attachment ID, property ID, unit ID. We didn't have a unit ID before, but now we do. What is that unit ID? That unit ID is going to come directly from K3 there. So we can put that in right here. So the property ID, this in this case is going to come from B3, right? B3 is located our property. If I select a property here, we know our property ID is in B3. So we can set that up, property ID B3, and our unit ID is located in K3. Okay, so we'll update that. So now we have everything for the attachments and the file path. Nice. File path is going to come right here. So good. Unit attachments load. That's the only thing we need to focus on here. Save our work. So basically, all we've done this here. So we can assign it to the group. Right click, assign the macro. This one's called unit add attachments. Click OK. So that's going to do it. So the last thing again, it's going to add attachment right to here, but all I need to do is make sure now that I load in those attachments. So now what I need to do is I need to use this as our criteria, this is our results. So all we need to do is just make a few small changes to that. So unit attachments load. Sheet 3, the first thing we're going to do is clear out the contents. This is no longer K, right? We're now clearing M. So M is our column here. So we're going to make those updates M and then M. Okay, so we cleared out the contents. Now sheet 11, K3, now we want the unit ID, right? The unit ID, remember, we changed the text here before it said property, but it's not K3. L3 is going to take on the unit ID. So L3 is going to do just that. So we need to, that's for our criteria, L3. It's going to be the unit ID. So that's all we need. And in fact, L is where our criteria is focused on, so that's only criteria that I want in that case, L3. So again, the last attachments row, everything else stays the same. O2, our results are going to come in here. In this case, sheet 3, which is our units, M, we want those attachments coming into M, column M this time. Bring over the file attachments. Now we're ready to test that out. Okay, save our work, saving frequently, always good idea. Going into the units and tenants, all right, let's go ahead and, we really need to add a tenant. Let's go ahead and add a tenant and save it. We do have one, but we also want to load in those units. So, all right, let's add in Fred Johnson. I'm like Fred. Okay, unit 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we don't need everything else. Let's just save this, all right? Save or updated, that's good. Now we have that. And let's go ahead and add the new one. You know what? We need to do one thing. We got to clear out K3. That's really important. K3, because notice it's already sent it. So if we don't clear out K3 and we had add new, it's going to assume it's going to existing, which is why it didn't save. So let's do that. That's really important. Let's make sure K3 gets cleared out inside our unit. So that's on the add new all the way up here. K3, adding K3, very important, K3. So now let's put in the 1 here just for sake. Click cancel new. Okay, we're going to add that. Let's assign the macro there, cancel, but clearing save. There we go. Okay, so let's clear that out now. We'll just add in Fredders and unit number 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we do need to add a property ID in there, so add in a specific property. Notice there's no unit row. Test some notes. We're good on everything else. Now what I want to do is save it. Okay, now it's been saved. Now we have a new unit row. That's exactly what I want. Click add new, clearing out this. That's perfect. That's what I want. We need to do cancel new. Right click, assign. If we didn't create a macro for that, let's just delete that. I don't necessarily need that because as soon as we select a new property or as soon as we select a new, it's going to delete. So we're good on that. Just save is fine. So we do need to rename this group. We're going to call this again new group, right? Because we deleted one item in there. So new group. Okay, so that's fine there. Click save. But as soon as we add a property in here, as soon as we select a unit, it's going to load in. So that's fine for us. going to load it in automatically. Let's add that in. I want to add in all the units for the selected property. Let's go ahead and bring that unit. We have unit load that. We've covered that. Unit delete. We've covered that. Add attachments. Add attachments. So what I want to do is I want to load those units in. So let's write that right now. So we can write it after unit delete right up there. So here, let's write in that macro sub unit, and then we'll just call it load units because I want to load in all the units associated with a specific building. So the first thing what I want to do is clear out anything, and I want the unit ID to load here, and I want the unit number to load in here. So I'm going to clear out from C4 all the way through D11. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Sheet 3 dot range C4 through D11, and then dot clear the contents. So clear contents. So we've cleared out the contents for the units. We're going to focus on sheet 8. That's where our database for our units is, with sheet 8. Okay, the first thing what I want to do is determine the last unit or last unit row. Where's it going to be equal to? It's going to be equal to A in the last row. Okay, so that's going to give us our last unit row. Once we have that, we can then determine if it's less than 4. If last unit row is less than 4, that means there's no data, then exit sub. We don't want to run this if we don't have any units at all. Okay, assuming that we do have, what we want to do is then set the property ID, right? All of our units that I want to load are based on a single property ID. Only want units from this property ID. So when we go into the units database here, I want to set a criteria based on that. Where do I want to put it? I'll put it right here. Let's just say in O3. So I want that property ID. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put it right here in O2. So we're going to call this criteria. And I want that unit ID to go right inside O3. So let's put that in here, color that. Let's color that a different color here, something like this, and then put this in here. Okay, so now we've got that. Now I'll just group that. O3. So then I want the results. And what do I want in the results? Well, basically I want the unit ID and I want the unit number. So I'm going to copy this. And where do I want those results? I want those results to go, let's say Q and R. So let's say Q2 here. I want the unit ID. It's always best to copy the header, and I also want the unit number. So copying that way, because the headers have to be exactly right. So that's where our results are going to go. So I'm going to put in results here. I'm just going to copy the format here so everything looks consistent. I'm going to paste the special and paste that format here. Okay, merge and center it here. Now, so what I want is the results. I want the unit ID and the unit to come here in the Q and R. Then I'm going to determine the last row of those results, and I'm going to bring that right in here into units. I'm going to bring it here. And then what we can do is we can hide this or change the font color. We don't need to see this, but we certainly want to see the unit. Then when I select on a specific unit, I want that unit to load up. So let's continue on and let's add that in right now. So we can write that code right here. So we know if it's last unit. So now what we want to do is add that inside. So I'm going to take whatever's in sheet 803. What I want to do is take whatever's here in B3 here, and I want to add it into O3, our units database right here. Put it right directly there in O3. That's our criteria. So dot range O3 dot value equals sheet 3, that's our units, dot range B3 dot value. That's our property ID, because we only want units associated with a single property. And now what do we want to do? Now we get ready to run our advanced filter. So let's go ahead and write that in. I'll just do it real quick. Okay, that's going to set some defaults. That's auto hotkey that I'm automating that. It saves a lot of time typing. Again, I only want from our unit ID all the way to our unit number, right? So we don't want anything else. So all I need to do is have our advanced filter go from A to D. So that's the date, A and then to D. And it's going to be based on our last unit row, not transaction, unit row, last unit row. Okay, so our results, of course, are going to come here, but I want our criteria to show up directly between O2 and O3. So O2 and then O3. Okay, that's our criteria. Our results are going to come in Q2 through R2. So we're going to change this from Q2 through R2. That's where we want the results. That's going to bring in those properties. Once we have that, we need to determine, we could determine the last row of our property. So then we can bring it all in. So how do we do that? Instead of bringing in all we have is set amount. So why don't we just bring in a lot of rows? It's pretty much easier just to bring in, just take a section and bring it in. You could determine the last row and bring only in, but in this case, we can avoid one line of code just by bringing everything in. So in this case, what I want to do, I want to say C4 through D, and let's just say 11. That's easy. to just so what we have. Of course, you can increase it. You probably would. Dot range, actually sheet 3, because we're focused on sheet 3. That's our units. In this case, C4 through D, in this case 11, equals dot range R3 through Q, and let's just say 10, Q10. Okay, so that's going to bring in the exact number of units, whatever. So it's up to 10 or so. Let's say, that gives us about, 8 or so, but that's fine. That's covering for our purposes today. But you can increase it. You probably would. So it's going to bring in, so basically Q through R. Okay, so that's going to bring in unit details. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now that we have the unit details, that's all we need to go. So that's it. So that's load units. So that's all I want to do when I save or something or add a unit. So I'm going to save that. And now what we want to do is just run that macro. I'm going to run the macro here, take a look and see if there's anything we need to fix on that. Last unit row, we need to set that variable, making sure that's set up. So I'm going to add that variable up in here. Last unit row as long. Now we've got that. Let's continue with that and see where we are. Then want to restart. Okay. Continue with that. Okay. And then value equals. Forgot the equals there. Okay. That's not helpful. All right. Extract range. So we have, you'll see this a lot. Missing extract range. So that means something is wrong with ours. We know we've copied this up, so we know they're right. Probably starting at the wrong row. I think we started at 2. Should be our data starts on 3. Make sure our headers are on 3. It has to be 3, not 2. Continuing on. Okay, it looks good. We put in the property ID. The units are coming here. That's exactly what unit ID, unit. Now we look inside our units and templates. That's what I want. We can left justify that, but that's exactly what I want. So now the idea is when I select on one of these, I want that unit to load up here. So how do we do that? Okay, let's write that code. Now we know we've got the unit load already. We know we're loading it, but I still have to have some selection change. On selection change, I want something to happen here. So how do we do that? So let's go into the developers and make that change inside our on-sheet code. So let's bring this up a little bit so we can take a look at this. I want to focus on the unit sheet. This is the code that I want to do. On selection change, I want something to happen. So selection change, well, if what happens? If the user makes a change, a selection change from, let's say, D4 to D11 or whatever you want. If not, okay, so we're going to focus on the range D4, and let's just say D20 or whatever, any range that's high, depends on how many units. And I want to make sure that C doesn't contain. C is our ID, so that's really important. C is our unit ID. And range, spell that right, range, C and the target row, C and the target dot row, making sure there's value, dot value is not equal to empty. Then, only then can we go ahead and load it. Then what do I want to do? Well, I want to take this, right? I want to take this and I want to put it directly in here. Remember, as soon as I add a unit ID here, I have a unit row. When I have a unit row, I can then load it. So all I need to do is take the ID that's here and place it directly inside K. So that's just what we're going to do. Then we can run the macro. So range, we don't need dot or anything like that. Range, we don't need a sheet because we're on the sheet. In this case, K3 dot value equals range C and the target dot row dot value. That's going to add in unit ID, not the unit number, the unit ID. Then I just need to run the macro to load the unit. So the last step is just unit underscore load. That's the macro that runs that. Okay, so let's save our work, always a good idea, and then continue on. So now when I select something, I want to load it. There we go. Again, all we want to do is we don't want this bleeding over. Put a space in there, bring it all the way down. That's what I want. But I also want to know what unit I've selected. I want to know what unit is selected. So how do we do that? Well, we can do that with conditional formatting. So let's do that. And I want to just highlight basically these. I want to go into home, conditional formatting, manage rules. There are going to be 2 conditions. So we're going to use and in a formula equals and what conditions are those? First thing I do is I want to make sure that I5 is not blank. So I want to make sure I5 is not blank. So we can just do I5 does not equal empty. What else? In this case, I want to make sure in this case D and whatever row associated, so we're going to take out the absolute $sign there, D4 is equal to whatever is located in I5. So that's it. Those are the 2 conditions. I'm going to format that a little bit different. So clicking on format, I'm going to fill it. I'm going to give it some fill effects and just choose some specific colors in here. We can choose these 2 colors, something nice like this. maybe a little bit darker than this here. So I want, so we'll go with a little bit lighter color. Once we have something like that, something consistent with our theme, click OK. Now give it a font. I want to make it bold, and then I want to set it to white. So we have our white color here, and click OK, and click OK again. Now click apply and click OK. So that's what I want. So now when I select something, notice that it's automatically, we have it selected. So now it's easy. All right, this has been an awesome 90-minute training. We've got a lot to cover next week, but we're going to get this complete next week. We've got transactions, alerts, and a really cool dashboard. I promise you I will squeeze it all in next week. Just don't miss part 3. It's going to be an amazing training. I can't wait to bring it to you. We've covered a lot this week. We've added properties, we've added units, and we've created a really, really incredible application. We're working on it step by step. Next week will be the completion. We'll be adding a dashboard you won't want to miss. The dashboard is going to look just like this. It's going to be really cool. All right. Thanks so much. I appreciate you sticking with us on part 2 of the Rental Property Manager. We'll see you next week for part 3 and the final.